Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, we successfully create our all that view page, right? And now I want to load our form. So friend, in our basic fundamental, I have already discussed about that things with you. How can load all that musician table from on here, and from here, how can insert that data. So previously we insert that all data in our default Django SQLite. So right now we will insert all the data from here and we will insert it in our database into this position. So first of all, I want to work for our musician. So here I want to load all that our musician form data. So if you want to add that form data, so right now we don't need this, everything I just remove it. Okay, so that is our model. So into this model, I have already defined the 3 of this field. So now I want to work for our form. So that means here I want to load all that our musician form data. If you want to work with this, then you have to go to your fast application, and that is our forms, right? So you can see previously I have already discussed about that things with you. So here I have defined one of the class as a musician. So right now that is our validator. So right now we don't need this validator. I just simply remove it. Here you have to define your Django input forms. That means one of the building form library. Okay, that is our forms. And also from our fast application, I import that models. That means I input that models, right? So now after that, there is our class. Into this class area, I want to create one of the class as a musician form, and then I have already discussed about that things with you. Here I inherited it with our forms. That means our Django library, that is a forms, and here I define another class as a model form class. Okay, and after that I define as a meta class. Into this meta class, that means if you want to create one of the class inside another class, then you have to define that with the meta class, right? So with this meta class, I have defined that model, that into the models. That means with these models, I want to access our musician. That means in our musician, that is our class, right? So I think you already know about it because we did the same thing. So now we will do that again. So into the model, I define our model name as a musician, and then into the field area, I want to take all the data. That means in our models, here they have the 3 field. I want to take all the data, right? So for the reasons here, we don't need to create anything because everything I have already created. So right now I want to use it. So that is our fields, all the data. So after that, what exactly we did? We have to actually load our form, right? So if you want to load this form, we have to work in our views. That means here, and in particular that our function, that means in particular this function area, first of all, I want to load our all that field, right? So that is all that field I want to load. So if you want to load it in our this function area after this, okay, after this here, you have to work. So I just simply define as a form, okay. So make that sure you added input this form. So here I have already added this. So with this form, I first of all create one of the object with this form object, and I just name that form object name. Here in our form area, I define that name as a musician form, right? So that is actually our class. So now I just simply copy it, and now here I created one of the object for this one. That is our musician form object. So here I just simply defining it, and now we have to pass it, right? We have to pass it in our dictionary. Into the dictionary, previously I have passed our title. So after that also I want to pass our another one as a, I just name it as a musician. That means our this one. So here I pass it our musician form, and into the musician form I want to pass this object data. That means I take the things with this variable as a form. So here we have to pass it. So I just simply pass it with this form. Okay friend. So now we have to work in our fast tab and our HTML page as a musician form HTML page, right? So now go to our template and the fast tab, and that is our musician form. So here we have to load one of the form, right? So I just simply define one of the form, and then into the form we don't need any class. So I just simply remove it. And also here we don't need any action. I only need that our method. So here I just simply remove it. So that is a post. Better I make the things as a capital post. Okay. And after that, here I want to load our musician. So here I pass it with this musician form. So that is actually the musician form. So I just simply copy it, and now here I define as a musician form. So into the musician form, it should be loaded all that our form, and from here I also want to insert this data, right? So if you want to insert that data, as I told you before, then you have to define your percentage, and here you have to define the CSRF token. So I just simply define as a CSRF, because without CSRF token you cannot insert any data, right? So I just simply define as a token. That means the CSRF token, and also after that I want to define on the input field, and input type I name it as a submit. So I just name it as a submit, and also put that name will be as a submit, and here I define that value. I define that value as a add musician. Okay, I just name it as a add musician, this type of one of the button. And also if you load your musician, then automatically it should be in one line. So if you want to make the things in your paragraph, then as I told you before, here you have to define as a dot as underscore p, right? So it should be now loaded with the paragraph wise, that means one by one. So I just simply load it. Perfect. So now our form, that means our musician form, should be visible. Like I just click as a save all, and now I want to check it, our server. Yeah, everything is okay. Now go here, go to the home, refresh this page, go to our add musician. Yeah, you can see for the add musician, they have the three fields as a first name, last name, and the instrument. And that is actually our text. So here I define some of the text. So that is actually our text is now visible as a this one. And after this, I load our form. So you can see it's now perfectly loaded. So if you go to that model, into the model, there is actually the three field as a first name, last name, and the instrument. And you can see there is a first name, last name, and the instrument. And also here, if you want to update your button style, then you can also do it, because of all we are using the Bootstrap. So into the Bootstrap, they have a lot of the code like here. So here I define on the class. I define on the class as a btn primary. Okay, btn primary, and then btn that is sm, but I just simply define as sm. Okay, so that is actually one of the Bootstrap class I'm using on here. Click as a save all, and now refresh it. Yeah, you can see it's now become updated. And also here you can see that is by default actually getting that name. So if you want to change it, I have already discussed about that things with you. If you want to change it, if you want to make that things as your own name, then you can use it with using that argument, right? So right now I think you already know about it. So now I want to save this data. That means here if you put your first name, if you put your last name and the instrument name, and after that if you click as a add musician, then it should be save all the data, and then this data will be saved in our database area. That means here, right? So how can do that work? So if you want to do this work, I think you already know about it, what exactly you have to do. So that is our post. Now we have to work in our view, into the view, and that is our method. That means here that is our function as a musician form. So into the musician form, first of all, here we have to define some of the conditions, right? It should be just like that same what exactly we did before. Okay, like here I do that again. Like here, first of all, you have to define of the if condition, and if with this request, if this request and then method, right? Into the method equal, first of all, it should be check is post method or not. So I just simply define as a post, or if when it will be post. So after that, here we have to define our form. So I just simply name it as a form, and then with our these forms, forms without this form, I have to define our musician form. Before that was actually empty. So now first of all I want to store all the data. So here there is our musician form. I just simply defining it and the request. So friend, I think you already know because we did this work before with the same things I am defining on here. And after this I want to define our if condition again, because here I have to insert this data, right? I have to save it and I have to commit this data into this database. So for the reasons, into the if, here I define our form. So into the form, first of all I want to check it as it is valid or not. So I just simply define as a valid. If it is valid, then I want to save this data. That means I want to save all that our form data, right? I want to save all that our form data. So dot save, and here I want to save with the commit. So with this commit I want to save it. So if you want to save it, then you have to define as a commit as a true. So I just name it as a true. And when this data will be inserted, that means when this data will be commit, when this data will be inserted in our database, and after that I want to do, it should be redirected to our home page, right? So if you want to redirect it to the home page, then you have to do, you have to return it. So here you have to return it in our index function, right? I have already created one of the index function. Into the index function I load, that means I render our which page, I render our index.html. so here I want to define as a return, and then our index function, it should be returned with this request, because it is this index function, there is a request, so I just simply define that request. Okay friend, so that's all you have to do. So here I have defined that two condition. I think you already know about it. So from here I want to insert all that our form data, that means the musician form data. So now let's check this out. I want to check it, click as a save all. I just click as a save all. First of all I want to check it. Yeah, everything is now perfect. Now go here, refresh this page. And now I want to insert some of the data in our database. I have already insert some of the data, previous one from our admin. From this admin I insert as a Kazarian, right? So now I want to define another one. I just name it first name as a Michael Jackson. So I just simply first name define as a Michael. Okay, Michael, and then name I define as a Jackson. And then instrument I define as a tabla. Okay. Tabla. And now I want to insert this musician, click as a add musician. Yes, now you can see friend, when this data is inserted, as I told you, so here I have defined this condition. So when this data will be successfully commit, then it should be returned to our index. That means here it should be returned to our index, and here you can see it's now showing our home page. So now that means our data is successfully inserted. That means if you go here, browse it again, yeah, you can see there is another ID is added as a 2ID, the first name as a Michael and the last name Jackson, and I define that installment as a tabla. Perfect. And also if you go to our admin, and here if you now refresh it again, now you can see is also successfully inserted on here. So now I want to actually read this data. That means from our database I want to read this data, and I want to visible it in our home page. That means here it should be visible. So here if you want to work with this, then you have to work in our index functions, right? So now go to our index function. That means into the index function area. Here I want to first of all get all the data. So I just take one of the variable. I take one of the variable as a musician list. Okay, so I just name it as a musician underscore list. I take one of the variable, and into this variable I define our musician. That means our table name as a musician. So I just simply define our musician table name, and from to this table I want to get all that our objects, right? So I just simply define as objects, all that objects. And also if you want to define as a order by, then you can also define that order underscore by, and I want to order by with the our field name. If you want to order by with the first name, you can define that first name, last name, and the instrument. So now I want to use that first name, so I just copy it, and here I define our order by as a first name. And now we have to pass it. So we have to pass it in our diction. That means here, because in our index page I have to visible. So for the reasons here I want to define our this variable. So that is our musician list, and I just pass that things with the name with the musician list. Okay, so here I just simply defining it, and now we have to do with this musician list, we can actually display our all the data in our index page. So now go to our index.html. That means in our templates, and that is our index.html. So here I want to change it. So here I name it as a list of musician. Okay, musicians list I want to visible, and here I want to visible it. So here if you want to visible, first of all I want to define it with the UL. Okay, with this UL I want to display it, and here first of all we have to define our condition. That means our if condition. So I just simply define as a percentage, double percentage, and here I define our if condition, and into the if condition I get all that our name, I get all that name with the musician list. So now I just simply copy it, and now here I define as a musician list. Okay, so here I define as if condition. That means if there have any musician list, then it should be display all that musician, and else it should be display another one. So better I want to finish it. That means I want to finish our this if condition. So I have to finish it, so I just simply define as a and if. Okay, and here I want to use that our else condition. So into the else, okay, else it should be display some of the another text. It should be display some of the another text with the h3 tag. Here I define it should be display the no musician in the list. So this type of one of the message it should be display, right? And if he get any data, that means if they have any data, then it should be displayed. So here if you want to display this data, you have to display it with using that for each, right? So you have to display it with the for loop. So here if you display that for loop, I think you already know about it with the for, and here I want to name it as a musician. Okay, I name it as a musician and in our this musician list. So now if you want to display your all that form data, that means all that our database table field data, then you have to display it with this musician, right? So now we have to also finish our this for each. So better I want to finish it. So I want to define as and for. Okay, I will just simply define our and for, and that will be our else. Perfect. And now here I want to define our li. Into the li I want to display all that our list. Here I want to display our first name. So with this musician we have to display it. So with this musician I want to display our field name. So if you go to our database, and into the database you can see our field name as a first name, last name, and the instrument. So better go to structure, and that is our first name I want to visible. So here with this musician I want to display our first name. Okay, and also I want to take another one. I want to display our another name as a last name. So here with this musician I want to display our last name. So our last name will be as a last name. So now let's check this out. If you now click as a save all, first of all I want to check it, everything is well. Go to our page, that is our home page, click as a refresh. Yes, you can see right now I have that data as a Kazarian and the Michael Jackson and the Michael Jackson. So there have actually 3 data is added. Like here you can see there is 3 data is added. There is a 1, 2, 3. Better I want to remove it. So now we have to go to our home page again, refresh it. Yeah, you can see now it's perfectly display our Kazarian and there is actually a Michael Jackson. Okay friend, so now if you want to add new one, so now go to our musician, and here if you want to add new one as a Taylor Swift, so I just simply define as a Taylor and the Swift. Okay, Taylor Swift, and I just name it as a again the guitar. I just name it as a guitar. Okay, sorry, TER. So now if you click as the add musician, yeah, you can see there is a Kazarian, the Michael Jackson, and our Taylor Swift. So every data is now actually comes from our database table. So from here every data is now coming. Okay, so I hope you can well understand about it. And friend, here if you actually refresh this page, automatically it should be inserted this data, because of all you can see that actually URL is the same. So you have to go to the home, and from here you can see it's perfectly visible. So we successfully complete our add musician. So from here now you can actually add your musician, and also you insert it data into the database area, and also we read all the data and visible all the data in our home page. So also we have to do the same things for our add album. So here also we have to load our album form. So how can do that work? In our next video I will show you that things with a live example. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.